Hello, my name is Gary Mansfield, and this is the Ministry of Arts podcast, where each week I'll be speaking to a different artist. Now let's begin by bagging these bongos.
Yeah, right. Crazy.
Hello, and welcome to episode 221 of the Ministry of Arts podcast. And just before I start, I've got to play you a little bit of information about this episode. For the third consecutive year, we've partnered with the Kensington and Chelsea Art Week and Art Trail, where we get the opportunity to speak to several of their featured artists. And today's episode is one of those. But before I take you to meet them, let me just give you a little bit of information about the Kensington and Chelsea Art Week and Art Trail. The Art Week is, it's just a little bit longer than a week. It runs from the 22nd of June until the 2nd of July. And the Art Trail runs from the 16th of June right up until the end of August. And the Art Trail even has its own art bus. It stops in a location of various artworks, and you can jump on and jump off at your heart's content. For the full list of featured artists and a whole lot more information, go over to the Kensington and Chelsea Art Week Instagram page, which is KCAW London, and you'll find everything there that you need. Today I'm taking you to meet Saira Jamieson. Saira is a person who's got many strings to her bow, and a multidisciplinary artist is just one of them. And although Saira lives and works in London, she does originate from South Asia, and it is that heritage and culture that is celebrated in Saira's work. And like most cultures, Saira's was steeped in both religious and social tradition, many of which were too complex for the younger Saira to understand. And up until today, Saira is still asking questions and trying to discover those answers within her artwork. This really was for me quite an educational conversation. So please, come along with me as I spoke to Saira Jamieson.
Hey.
How are you today? You good?
Yeah, good, thank you. Yeah, how are you doing?
Not bad. You're in a very bright space there, wherever that is.
It's actually my studios where I work.
Nice. Where's that?
So yeah, it's nice. So Camelot Studios.
Oh yeah, I know.
Yeah, over in West London. Yeah. So this is. I want to show you. That's my studio.
That is cool.
Yeah, so that's my my studio space. Yeah, no, I love it here.
And that's your lounge area.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that bit over there.
I have several questions that I ask each guest. And the first being, how would you explain what you do to someone that didn't know your work?
So I guess I'm a multidisciplinary artist. I'm a biographical artist. So a lot of my work really stems from my diaries, my identity, who I am. But I've got a background kind of steeped in tech, in events, in business, in hospitality.
Oh yeah.
Lots of quite colourful, should we say? Just going to turn it down there. There we go. It's nice, the background, isn't it? And and so yeah, so I really have pulled in quite a lot of my past and my background and injected that into my art practice, if that makes sense.
It very much so. You mentioned about your background heritage. Could you give us a little bit into that, please?
Yeah, so I'm a South Asian artist. I was born in London, but raised in London and Pakistan. So my dad is from Islamabad, my mum is from Lahore. And I came backwards and forwards up until probably the age of 16. And it was really a huge part of my heritage and my culture. And I didn't really know what Western life really was until I kind of bolted and found it out for myself, really, as I got older. It was a very different upbringing to, what my kind of Western friends had. And it's really only much later on in life that I started comparing and going, God, can't believe you got to do that. And I can't believe you got to do this. Like, I remember like reading my diaries and going, oh my God, I've got like, I can't believe I've got a friend who's brown and who's allowed to go to Australia for 3 months. Like, what kind of family is she from? Because it's, it's very, when you kind of come from an Eastern culture, particularly quite traditional, your life is very, very different. And you don't know it until you have something else to compare it to. So South Asian, British born, Pakistani artist.
Yeah, and like you said there, when you're growing up within a family, you just presume that every other family is the same as yours.
Totally, entirely, yeah. And until you have something to compare it with, you really don't really understand. Also, you kind of judge by your own kind of experience and standards, So I was I think looking back, I must have been a really bit of a shitty teenager, judging all of these girls that are going out, kind of having all of that freedom, watching from my bedroom window, her hanging out and meeting boys, I was really, because obviously, like for me, you don't have boyfriends, you just get, you get married and that's it. And your parents pick somebody out for you. And that's how life works. And all of these white people running around, meeting people, meeting boys. I couldn't believe it. I really couldn't believe it. I mean, as I said, I found diaries a couple of years back and reading what some of my thoughts are quite cringy. Yeah, for sure.
And how was the cultural change when you got to an age and you started to find your own little bits of freedom?
Oh God, it was tough is probably going to be the first word that I use, because I suddenly realized that I didn't want what was set out for me. And you don't really do that in a family like mine. My dad, I mean, he only passed away over a year ago, and really, even up until he died, he was a huge influence in my life. In fact, I wouldn't be doing this podcast if he was still alive, because I'm very, very reluctant to share my life whilst he was still around, because I just felt it wasn't safe to do so. So it's at that, when I made that transition of realizing this isn't what I want, it was a really confusing time. And not to keep going back to my diaries, but actually I read that moment, and it was quite dark. I just kept writing over and over and over and over again, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? How, like, show me a sign. If there is a God, show me a sign. Like, I don't want to be here, but this is my path. I was always, kind of engaged at some point to somebody in Pakistan. There was always that kind of path that was set out for me. And I realized I just wanted to go and study, and I wanted to be creative. And that was never a part of my plan as a Pakistani daughter. So it was petrifying, realizing that I needed to go against the grain.
I could imagine. And how did creativity come into your life?
I actually think I literally came out of my mum with a paintbrush in my hand. I think it probably was I think it was probably a result of some sort of like generational trauma that I felt like I needed to kind of like, have an outlet. So, I was really, I don't like growing up, I wouldn't call it trap because it's all I knew, but I was in my room until I was 16. And I just painted and I painted and I painted and I painted the walls. That was my life, literally, because I couldn't, even though I kind of wrote, I also wrote in code because, of course, I was too scared of anybody finding my diaries.
Of course,
So I wrote in this kind of like weird code, and I painted a lot because it allowed me to express certain things that I was feeling and I couldn't really obviously disclose. And my mum was appalled at what I was creating. She'd be like, why are you not creating, like, what's wrong with you? What are these weird creatures? I was doing like weird beings with tentacles and all sorts of weird stuff coming out, and dragons flying out of windows. I was obsessed with like kind of mythical creatures and windows, which of course, you go down the line and you see Dali, and it was all about escapism, right? Literally, that was what I was trying to do kind of in my mind as well. So it was it was a big part of my upbringing, just really within me, because I think I had to turn to something and spend all those hours doing something. And it turned out that it was that, really, which of course I'm quite, in a weird way, lucky, because it honed my skills. The work that you see in my studio today is basically just extension of the stuff that was in my diaries back then, which is quite fortunate, I guess. So something beautiful came out of something quite dark.
Do you feel free at the moment?
God, that's a complex question.
You mean,
Yeah,
do you
I
feel like you're
do,
your
but
own person?
I think I'm probably the freest I've ever been. And then I've got a 13-year-old daughter, and so I'm, kind of trying to navigate that as well. About, and the word that, like, freedom comes in my artwork a lot. My first show was kind of life's algorithm, like how you're meant to be on a path, but you're not, and you end up finding your way to that path. And then my second, and then love letters and old scars. It really is the very nucleus of everything that I do, is freedom and what that has meant to me. And weirdly enough, my relationship with freedom, it's so interesting that you pinpointed that, because it is the word that is in my work, and it's really changed since my father passed away. Because of course, all my work up until that point was a reflection of my diaries, which was all, how do I get out of this situation? Effectively, how do I escape from that life? And then suddenly he's no longer there anymore, and you can't, like, it's a really strange concept, because suddenly he's not there, so it doesn't matter. So I should feel completely and utterly free, really. I don't know. I think I still got a lot to explore.
Yeah, well, that's why I asked the question, is because I'm well aware that the father of the family is judge and jury of all things cultural, family, religious, and the household. It's within the community a lot of the times, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, my dad was basically, he was brought up in Pakistan. He was in the RAF. He was, he was a really brilliant man. I mean, he's also my hero, and he always will be. He taught me the art of work and hard work. He's the hardest working man I know, other than my husband now. And it's funny because my mum said, "You married your dad now?" And I'm like, "Whoa, that's intense." He was this incredible force of nature that tried to put me into a box. But what he didn't realize was, I am him. I do not take after my mum. I take after my dad. And so we were literally like two explosions going at each other for the longest time, until we kind of realized, my dad got a little bit older and a little bit more tired. And I think we just started to get on, really, after many, many, many years of feud. But I don't blame any of it, because it's his cultural heritage. He doesn't know any different to what he was trained to do.
Of course. And
So
people like myself who have been brought up with the benefit of nigh on no boundaries. It's hard to grab an understanding. It's only with time and speaking to people and having conversations that you realise, as far as freedom is concerned, I was quite lucky growing up how I did. But on the flip side, there wasn't much cultural and traditional elements in my life. I've had to create them myself, so it isn't a wholly bad thing, as we say.
No,
you can find a happy medium.
I mean, I've made, really, if you want to be crude about it, I've made an entire art career based on, in entrapment. But, and also it's, but also trying to work my way through emotionally and actually turn it into something not just positive, but something quite beautiful. Because it is such a beautiful culture. And, the stuff that I kind of went through was just circumstances. I've got loads of Muslim friends that have had, all the freedom in the world. It really is just circumstance of where you are and where you've come from. And now I'm trying to really spin it on its head and embrace it, and really get, like, I'm even trying to get my daughter into the culture as much as possible. These 9 events are certainly are helping. And we just did, in the last event, which was the Mendi, which is the dance, the kind of dancey event, me and her did a traditional Indian dance together, which we practiced every day for 7 nights. And I didn't think she would do it. She's an introvert and an extrovert. She's one of those. So my cousins are like, she's so shy, and I'm like, she's not at home. But we got up to the stage and we did it, and I was so proud of her. She's really embracing her culture, and I absolutely love that, about it. Yeah.
So that's where the freedom and culture can come together, because the people who have been steeped in that culture, they're afraid of losing it. That's why it's so tight, I presume.
Totally.
So if you think, if you're going to give someone freedom, they may not know how to have that freedom. They may, exploit it. And, so.
Well, it's hard, isn't it? Because you don't want it to get diluted as well. Like, I married into Western culture, for want of a bit, but want of a better way to say that I married a white man. And you know, it's and there are definitely parts of me that I look back on some of my diaries, and I've written things like, you know, I really like this boy and he's white, but what happens if I, you know, how does this play out if I married him? And then I've literally played my entire life out, you know, as a 13-year-old in a diary. And it's ended as basically doom. You know, it's ended in you've lost your family, you've lost your culture, you're not Muslim anymore, you're literally out there and you're ending up on the streets because nobody cares. You know, it's like that was my perception of Western society as a child, which was just all this freedom is not good, you know, because you don't know what you're doing with it. You don't know what you're doing with life. Whereas your parents run your life, your parents rule your life. That's how it should be.
But as you mentioned earlier, having a respect for freedom is something that not all people have got.
Yeah, for sure. Totally. I mean, I laugh about it at home because I would say sometimes my daughter, you know, someone's like, oh, we've run out of milk. And I'm like, I'll go. It's like 11 o'clock at night. And I tell you why I love walking to the shops at 11 o'clock at night, because literally up until the age of, you know, 27 being at home, I was never allowed to do that. Yeah. A girl is not allowed to walk outside on her own, you know, let alone in Pakistan, it's even worse. You have to have an army of men around you and not walk around, and they have to be your brother or your husband. Yeah. So even if I wanted to go to the market, I'd have to wait for one of my, you know, my brother to become free or my dad or somebody to take me. So it's funny, but even just walking around at 11 o'clock at night to go and get the milk from the corner shop makes me happy, because I still feel like, oh, this is, and even many years later, I still feel like this is nice being able to do this. It's so ridiculous, but it's still in there. By the way, the culture is very beautiful as well. Like I hate painting it in such a negative way, because also what came with my 16 years of being at home was, you know, we had weddings, probably one every month. My goodness. And it was so colorful and so vibrant. And we were always practicing dances at home. And, you know, we were constantly going to the weddings in Pakistan are like, they're just like, you know, they're like royal weddings, you know, and they last. Like at the moment, I'm going through a wedding, my cousin's getting married, and there are 9 events. There is one event for 9 weeks, and the last 2 are this Saturday and Sunday. And anybody coming to any one single event would go, but surely this is the wedding. Yeah. Like, no, this isn't the wedding. This is just one event of 9. It's spectacular. And I'm really trying to learn in the last couple of years to embrace my culture and really bring back the kind of the love and the beautiful and the vibrancy of it, you know, and not get too bogged down with its history. And that is really a lot of the toxic history is really learned, you know, stuff that comes down, you know, not really what it's meant to be.
You've got to sort of unlearn yourself, because it sounds to me like you've spent the first 16 years fighting everything because you couldn't have what you wanted, and then you sort of found your freedom, and now you're sort of pulling back on the parts of that culture and upbringing that are brilliant.
Totally. And actually, it's really interesting you say that word unlearn, because I've got a few art pieces which are literally called Unlearn or Unravel. And brilliant. you kind of hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what I'm trying to do, including even with my relationship with Saira, with my daughter. You know, I'm trying to unlearn, because there's certain things that she says, and I'm like, well, you know, as a Muslim, you should be doing that. And I'm like, what did I just say to myself? What is wrong with, you know what I mean? Like, oh, I can't even, you know. So I am, and even in my work, I'm trying to just be a bit more free and go, okay, let's not do things that, you know, I'm worried that someone's going to see, because everything I paint, I always get, who's going to see it? You know, my shows, I keep them so private. People are just like, my God, you know, you're not inviting to one of your shows. And I'm like, well, I am, but just people I know, because I don't want, you know, I don't want someone to take a picture of it and send it to my brother, because it's a woman with boobs, you know. I'm so ashamed all the time of my work. And I'm really trying in the last year to try and release that.
You've got to find a happy medium. Yeah. Ideally, you'd want to show the world. And if you feel culturally that you can't, then you have to do what you've done with your dad for years. You have to find a happy medium. That's all you can do. That's all you can do.
But you know what? It's nice that you say that, actually, because I don't normally get that response. Normally the response is, no, you know, be done with it and just go and do what you want to do. And just jump out the window. And I'm like, well, not really, because I also have to, in much the same way that when I go home, I cover my arms, I cover my legs, you know, and then people go, why don't you just wear what you want to wear? Your dad's not there anyway. And I'm like, because I'm respecting his house. My mum is still there. My cousins are there.
I'm respecting the faith. I wouldn't walk in wearing a string vest top, much the same way I wouldn't walk in with a glass of wine, or
Yeah, of course.
you just have to kind of, as you sort of say, find that happy balance where you're not going to torment anyone,
And
and
just
equally
because
you're
you
not going to.
found your freedom, it doesn't mean you've lost your respect, does it?
Exactly
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Your art journey, Sarah. So 16, you found a little bit of freedom outside of the home. Where does your creativity take you?
So from that point, I went to actually went to study at film school, Portsmouth University, and there I actually found my passion for semiotics and storytelling. Not kind of realizing really everything stems from from the age of like 11, diarizing, and it all is a lot of my, even in my diaries, a lot of it's stories. It's just lots of different stories. So it wasn't surprising that I went down that kind of road of semiotics, which is obviously symbolism. I didn't even realize semiotics was a word until I sort of read I was like, what is film school and what is semiotics? And suddenly, things click in your head. I'm like, oh my God, that's what I was doing as a kid. I was painting a really weird object and pretending that it represented a planet that I could run to if I needed to. It's a really strange thing. So studied film school, but of course, then I had to come back home, which was very difficult because it was agreed to be a stopgap before I assumed the role of wife. And that was quite difficult coming back. And again, I sort of just, I just worked and worked and worked my way up, because I realized that for better or worse, the only way I was going to get out of my situation and pursue my lifelong passion of creativity was making money, making my own money. And that's what I did. But in doing that, I became quite successful in the media agency industry, entertainment industry, hospitality industry, opened my own media company, ran that for 7 years. And everything I did was creative, but for other people. So I was creating, in-house, we were creating websites, we were creating DVDs, we were doing gaming stuff, we were doing events, we were doing, big fairs at music fairs, music festivals, VIP areas. Like, it was a 360 media company. It was brilliant, but it was for everybody else. It was creating, I had this, realized I had this knack for somebody going, I want to build this. And I'm like, I can see it, let me build it, and I built it, and it was great. And it allowed me, the success allowed me to invest in hospitality, because again, I love, I've got a strange passion for chefs and mixologists, because I think they're also very, very similar to artists, people that are definitely throwing ingredients together and creating something quite beautiful. So I kind of did that for ages, all while being at home. And then eventually I just thought, you know what, I can't do this. And I left. And it was really then that, my kind of career really started to take off. And I decided 5 years ago to just sell up, pack it all in, and do it for myself. And I became an artist 5 years ago. Thought I was going to be the next Tracy Emin. The first year was amazing. Oh my God, I was like, my stuff was going like hotcakes. And then COVID hit, and then suddenly nobody was interested in emerging artists.
Yeah. So
it was, but around that time was also when I found my diaries, and my work went very inwards anyway. So I was okay with that, because I really wanted to find myself and who I was as an artist. And that time really allowed me to do that, really.
See, as an artist, I mean, you're looking at yourself in a different life pretty much. And you've now, with the person that you are now and the experiences you've had, you're looking back into your diaries at your younger, more innocent, more controlled self.
For sure.
And trying to dissect your life then, because you didn't quite understand your life then. Yeah. And you still don't sort of quite understand it now. Really.
No, I'd love to have a full-time therapist. I'd love to have a full-time therapist in my studio, because there is so much that I do that it requires me to just sit back and think about why did I just produce that? And I'll always eventually tie it back to something that happened. And that is because I have all of this material since I was 11. So I can, usually I'm reading something and I'm like, oh God, that is so weird. Like, I can't believe I drew that weird creature. And now 25 years later, I'm recreating it. And I had no idea that I'd literally drawn that when I was, say, 13. It's
Brilliant.
really bizarre, like the connections that I'm making now, but that also needs time to do that. And because I'm not just an artist, I do like to get involved with lots of other things like AI technologies and hospitality. I think I kind of definitely the last few years have been spreading myself quite thin, and I'm really trying to now bring that into this studio and go, okay, you know what, I really need to give it a really good go, because for 5 years I've been really exploring and experimenting, but now I'm kind of ready to bring things like technology back into my practice as well. And also bring things back and not be afraid to do that. Like my background is technology, but I had visions of, you know, becoming a painter for the rest of my life and swanning around, and you know, of course, COVID kind of like put, as it did with many people, you know, put a little bit of a spanner in the works. So,
of course,
you know, but again, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because it's allowed me to, you know, shape my studio in a way where I realize actually maybe bringing in technology isn't a bad thing, you know, because it's very lucrative and it's tangible. And I understand algorithms and how AI works, because I had a company which was very algorithmic based. So I'm really kind of enjoying bringing that back into my practice now.
You don't have to work in one or the other. You know, it's your practice. It's many different things, and depending on the project you're working at the time, it can either be on a canvas, or it can be the keyboard.
And isn't that wonderful that
Brilliant.
you know, you've got these two, you know, we're in a really fortunate position, I think, our generation, because we get to play with old technologies and we get to look and play with new ones. And the work that I'm doing at the moment, because my Sarabesque series, which is my current series, is based on, you know, stuff from my diaries, and then I'm painting all of this stuff, and then I'm digitizing it, and then I'm shoving it into programs like Touch Designer and mashing it up and spitting it out. It's like this really great mesh and communication. It's like good, you know, it's like a good text that really starts somewhere, and then it's read by somebody like 150 years in the future, and then suddenly it means something else. And it's so beautiful that we actually get to forge these different technologies together, because maybe in, you know, down the future, it's going to be very, very digital, and paint might even be a thing of the past. You know, everyone's going digital now. So I love the fact that right now we are here and we get to fuse them together, and we get them to play with them together.
Sarabesque, is that pronounced properly?
Sarabesque. It's a made up word. So I don't know, it came out of my head one day because I was trying to define it. And actually the reason also why I gave it a name was because I realized that Sarabesque appears in a lot of my artworks, my painted artworks. In the background is texture. And I've never even thought about it. I've just like, I'll paint a beautiful, you know, woman in a background, sitting there, whatever, you know, eating fish, drinking wine. And then in the background, the sky will actually be made up of tiny little Sarabesque kind of marks. But I've never really thought about that. It's just something that kind of, you know, that I do. It's like a background markings that I kind of create. And actually, it wasn't until much later that so many people in my last show kept pinpointing those. And like one entire painting that I have is made up of tiny Sarabesque markings, but it looks like Arabic. And so people kept going, oh my God, is this entire piece made up of like Arabic scripture? And I was like, well, not really Arabic, but I guess, yeah, because, you know, I sort of grew up reading the Quran and I was obsessed with reciting the Quran. I just found it really like powerful. You know, I just thought it was so gallant, like reading this ancient text. By the way, I don't understand Arabic, so I have no idea what I was reading at all, because I speak Urdu and I can read and write Urdu, but not Arabic. So it kind of made it even more profound, because it's this text that you don't even know and you're chanting it and you're singing it. And so I used to, in my diary, I used to just write it over and over and over again, you know, in my head, write what I want to say. But what was coming out was my pretend Arabic, you know, which then translates later into this Sarabesque. And it allows me not to see it as an art piece, but as an art concept.
Yeah, of course.
Which then can be applied to lots of different things, really, you know, whatever. So I'm working in projection mapping, so I can, you know, map an old piece of painting, or I can map an entire space in Sarabesque. You know, it allows me to disconnect the Sarabesque is an art piece, and so that's a series and it's done, and it makes it into a, you know, into a state, into a technology, into something that I can grow, which I'm quite excited about. And you know what's really funny on that note, Gary, is that like people say to me, why don't you just write Urdu? And I'm like,
because then it's just Urdu.
Because
Then it's understandable.
Exactly that. But people like, so basically you're writing Urdu, and I'm like, no, it's Arabic. Could be, of course it could be, but I'm like, in my head, it's a morphing, it's a metamorphosis that came from the roots, came from me reading the Quran, my dad teaching me how to write like this, all of these different things, which kind of came together to produce this. But the fact that they are not words is what gives them their kind of semiotic power.
Yeah, definitely. If you're trying to create a feeling and sense of confusion, then something that is logical isn't going to work. And that is the language within you that you're trying to sort of tell someone else. And you don't even know what it is yourself yet. Even years later, you're still trying to decipher what you was as a child. And to be honest, you ain't ever going to get there, because you was asking too many questions at that time, and you're not going to live long enough to be able to figure out them answers, are you? You know?
I know. Honestly, Gary, I think you've unlocked the meaning of my latest series.
But there you go. And your work is included in the Kensington and Chelsea Art Week.
Yes, Kensington Chelsea Arts Week. So I've taken a part in Kensington Chelsea Arts Week quite a few years now. And last year I had a brilliant 10 days. Oh my God. So I took over a space on Portobello Road, because I was in a Web3 whirlwind last year, because I'm quite an extreme person. And when I kind of grab onto something, I sort of went a bit crazy. So I was like, I'm going to create a NFT series. And I literally just did this kind of like mini worldwide tour with my blockchain boobies, and Miami, New York, my work appeared everywhere. It was amazing. And I was on as a South Asian girl that bangs on about kind of, my culture should be heard. I was put onto probably a little bit of tokenization, but you know what? It was fine. If I get to talk about my culture, you know what? So be it. So I was kind of put on quite a few panels last year and given some incredible opportunities. And I rode that wave to death. And so off the back of that, the Chelsea Arts Week have given me the Exhibitionist Hotel as a playground, which is wonderful. So I think I'm literally planning it as we kind of talk right now. But I think obviously I want to disclose my Sarabesque concept, and I was really thinking about maybe bringing in a lot of my old work, filling the hotel with it, and then projecting my Sarabesque. So it really is that once again, it's bringing the old stuff and the new, putting it together to create new meaning and to show development, really. Brilliant. So yeah, it's really, and of course, as last year, I'll have a lot of, last year I had quite a few shows, had 5 shows last year, actually, 5 events, which were, because my other passion is hospitality. So I had a beautiful wine and art night, merging them together. I had an amazing night called Women of the Diaspora, where I brought 6 other women into the space, and they showcased all their talents. We had there were comedians, spoken word artists. One was a kind of Cirque du Soleil-esque sword soloer, and she did this amazing monologue. Like it was a great, and they were all from very different diasporic backgrounds. And then we ended up sitting down and doing a panel talk, a really, really frank panel talk about our pasts. And I think you get like a bunch of brown women in the room that are all hardcore creatives. My goodness, the stories, because essentially we're not meant to be here, right? Like that's it. I'm not meant to, according to all of our families, we are not meant to be doing this. So the path of every single one of us was fascinating. Like we realized we had so many similarities of growing up in the family, expectations, escaping, going back, escaping, and then ultimately escaping and finding your path. Really interesting. Yeah. So I just really enjoy bringing other people into my space to find out what they're doing and find ways of resonating with them, because I think as you kind of find, like you always end up resonating with people in the same field as you, particularly if you've got a similar background in or whatever it may be. The threads are fascinating, but we're all humans at the end of the day, so
Well, I would say that there's none would have a stronger sense of freedom as those that have witnessed not having it.
Totally. Absolutely. That's it. Nail on the head. Exactly. And I think that was the driving force with all of our lives, really. We, and it's funny because I just did a call out on social media to say, here are my blockchain boobies. I'm thinking about doing this wonderful event, and I'd love to get some women in. women of the diaspora, where are you? Have you found yourself being displaced from one place to another? Have you found your creative voice, and now you're using it to represent your past demons, past angels, whatever it may be? And I had about 35 women contact me going, oh my God, you literally just described my life. 5 of them thankfully happened to be in London on the date of my event. But nice. I would have, if I had a longer lead time, I probably could have had a room full of 300 women going, oh my God, we are, we're the same. And it's something quite calming about going, okay, I wasn't going through this alone, even though it's taken quite a few decades to realize that. Because we didn't have Instagram back then. So now I'm on quite a few amazing groups, which are like South Asian women, South Asian therapists, which are people that are coming together, that are unraveling all of these themes and issues that creatives from, like South Asian families have been through. And it's so interesting. So hopefully changes are on the horizon, because there's a lot more access to information, and people don't feel as lonely in these situations, because it's still, you still have a lot of families that are very, very traditional, that still expect their kids to have arranged marriages, and that's still very much going on today. And every now and then I even get contacted by girls sort of saying, like if I share a little bit of my story on a post, I'll get, people that send me a DM going, I read your post, and, I'm really glad that you escaped, and, I'm kind of in this situation now, I don't know what to do. And I would say, like, can I speak to you? Can we converse? And usually they don't. They're just like, it's just nice knowing that somebody else is in that situation, and they left. It's one of the reasons why I think I do want to, talk about this stuff, because it's very much prevalent today, and you don't get a lot of South Asian, particularly creatives, and particularly those that are willing to go on to a platform or stage and actually talk about it, because it is a dangerous subject to talk about. I mean, I think if this goes out on air, I'll probably get at least about 50 unfollows, and that's fine. It happens every single time. The minute I talk about anything cultural or anything like this, people do hit back, but I'm a bit over being offended by it now.
But unfortunately, anything where it's steeped in culture and tradition, it's a slow process to change, and it's normally a generational thing. Like, I'm presuming that your daughter isn't, or has more freedoms than you did, and possibly her daughter, or her child more so. How many times, Saira, have you said to her, when I was your age?
Oh my God, she finishes the sentence, and she sometimes says it even more. She's like, I know that when you were a kid, you never got to do this, but like she'll even say it before I say it. But
exactly.
and it's great. She's a creative as well. She's a skateboarder, gamer, and plays the guitar. She's a hardcore creative herself, quite dark actually. She likes her story, her dark kind of stories, which I find quite fascinating. But I think creativity was, I think, my release, and so I love that it's become hers, but but without the the kind of toxic constraints that I had. Really, it's quite wonderful to see her develop in that sense.
Good. Do you know Sarah Maple?
Yes, absolutely.
Good.
Love her.
Good.
Absolutely love her. Been to loads of her shows. She's actually one of the women that I would say inspired me to be a little bit braver in my story, for sure. Going to her shows and see her stand up and talk about things quite candidly, and also quite comically as well, which I thought you could never do, and she had like Arabic symbols in her work, which really shocked me. Like, I have to admit, when I first saw it, I was just like, who she thinks she is writing a bow on that? That's our God's name. What's she doing? And then I kind of walked away going, you know what? Good for her.
Yeah.
And if she can do it, so can I. And you know what? Hopefully, I'm not going to get struck down by lightning if I do that.
You mentioned the Exhibitionist Hotel where you work is showing. What spaces have you got in there?
Oh gosh, I actually met the lovely MD Saira the other day, and I thought I was just really having the lounge, but bless her, she sort of looked at all of my work, and she was like, right, we've got to get to everywhere. Like, let's walk around. And we sort of walked around. She's like, and you can do stuff there, and you can do stuff there. And we went down a corridor, and you can have this corridor. And we walked down another corridor, and I was just like, oh my God. And so that's one of the reasons why it's actually evolved, and it's now also a retrospective of my work, because I'm now thinking, you know what, I'd love to fill this space with new work, but time does not allow. And I thought, I've never ever had all my work ever exhibited in one place before, and it's all my series, and it's going to be really fascinating because it's my series from when I first became an artist, and then, you know, developing into kind of where I am now. So you could literally do a little walkthrough and see how my work has changed and, you know, kind of almost like unfurled. You know, it's quite painting when it first, you know, I was doing a lot of painting when I first started, a lot of storytelling, and it's kind of unraveled and unraveled to the point where now my Sarabesque is literally markings on a wall that use it, but using things like touch mapper and painting and all these different mediums to kind of create this incredible texture which looks like something ancient that you can read. So it's I'm really excited about seeing it all fill the space.
Sounds amazing. Yeah, you're rather lucky to have that space, right?
Oh my God, it's amazing. And of course, you know, no like Saira show is complete without some events. So I've got so far 2 events lined up. The first is going to be a lovely, obviously, private preview. And then the second event is going to be more of a kind of AI event. So I'm quite interested. I'm doing a lot of AI experimentations at the moment. And I'm talking to so many fantastic women in the space. We're on this really cool kind of AI decentral group. And I was in this morning at a brilliant AI event at Soho House from one of these groups. And, you know, I said to the girl, we've got to do a roundtable discussion, you know, and they're like, yeah, let's do it. Because there's so many brilliant conversations that I've been having right now about AI. A lot of artists, of course, are quite scared to go into it because of what it means. You know, a lot of AI, of course, is trained on other artists' work. So there's that whole conversation. But then there's that conversation of, well, AI doesn't have to be that. It could also be just machine learning, and you can actually input your work, and your work can be manipulated, you know, with machine learning over time. So there's a lot of different things that you can do and a lot of conversations to be had. So I really want to create an evening of AI discussions. And of course, I'll be doing a performance, an AI visual performance with a sound artist, which is quite similar to what I did at the Oxo Tower a couple of weeks ago. So yes, it's going to be quite fun.
I love the fact that hospitality has been part of your life for so long. This quite big exhibition of yours is in a hotel. Couldn't be better, could it?
I know, it's funny because actually I wish I had all the time in the world and all the budget in the world, because I also wanted to do an immersive dinner, which I'm now going to move to September, because I just it's grown into something brilliant and huge, but not able to do right now. And I'm really excited. It's the idea of bringing in food, art, music, drink, and literally filling a space with an experience where there is a story that is told throughout, and the food that you eat, the drink that you drink, and the visuals that you see all play a part of this story. Nice. So it's a bit kind of like, you know, walking through Alice in Wonderland, but kind of being fed and drink and being encapsulated by, you know, beautiful lights and sounds. So yeah, that's in the making. So yeah, hospitality has always been a huge part. I just love bringing people together and challenging senses, as well as so I've got the 10 days at Kensington Chelsea Arts Fair, but I've also got a 3-month residency at the hotel, which I've just been given, which is incredible. But it also means painting a 10-meter corridor, which I've got to get done before the fair opens. So hence all of the experiments that are going on back here, which are literally just like pages and pages and pages of wallpaper with me sketching my Sarabesque, because I'm going to need as much muscle memory as I can get. Every hour that's, you know, I have free, I'm painting Sarabesque on large scale wallpapers. So,
good on you. Good on you.
Yeah, so it's good. So, but because I've got it for those 3 months, that's why I'm quite excited about doing extended events. So September and October, I'll hopefully be doing the immersive dinners to really bring some fun.
So, to bring it all together.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, really exciting.
And where can people find what you're doing, be it website or social media?
My Instagram, Saira Jamieson, and then the links are there to just jump straight to my website. And on my website, there is a little mailing sign up for my little black book. And then as soon as I've got all my events planned, which I hope people do soon, because it's not that the space is quite intimate, which is lovely. But it means, and I don't want to pack out the events in the evening, because I want people to be able to roam quite freely.
A little bit of freedom.
So I'm going to be doing, guests. It's going to be guest list and limited numbers. So, if people can sign up so that they get the link beforehand, before I kind of just chuck it on and make it more public, that would be great.
Sounds pretty good to me.
It's exciting.
Well, that's all my questions are, Saira.
Amazing. Great. I feel like we know each other. Look, I feel like you know about my entire life now.
Oh, you may as well have been laying on a couch.
Well, you say that, I've got Shay Long here, so
Hello, I'm Vestolia Chilton, the director of Kensington and Chelsea Art Week and Art Trail. You've just been listening to one of our featured artists. Make sure to keep these dates, for the Art Trail starts on the 15th of June and lasts all summer, and Art Week starts on the 22nd of June and ends on the 2nd of July. All of this information is on our website, kcaw.co.uk. We look forward to welcoming you.
Well, hope you enjoyed that episode of the Ministry of Arts podcast. So we wasn't dictated to by advertisers, we decided from the offset to go ad-free, which means obviously we had to self-fund. So we set up the Ministry of Arts Patreon page. And without that support, we would not be able to produce this podcast. So if you like what you hear and you're able to support the podcast, just go over to the Ministry of Arts Instagram profile. You'll find a Linktree drop-down box, which will direct you straight to our Patreon page. And for the price of a cup of coffee, you can help keep us growing week by week. But if you're not able to do that, that's fine, because this content is free for everyone. But leaving a review on whichever platform you listen to your podcast, that really does help us get noticed and anyone else looking for an art podcast. Or even giving us a positive shout out on your social media. Everything is appreciated. But either way, thanks for listening, and until next week, ta-da.